Recording in progress.
Good morning. I'd like to call the Metro work session of March 12th, 2024 to order. Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Present.
Councillor Wong.
Present.
Councillor Gonzalez.
Present.
Councillor Nolan.
Present.
Councillor Rosenthal.
Yay. Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Good morning. Present.
And President Peterson.
Here. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our one and only agenda item for the day. It's that important. In February 2023, Metro Council and the Metropolitan Exposition Recreation Commission together provided unanimous direction to staff to memorialize the historical and cultural legacy of Expo Center and redevelop the site into a sports-centered facility. The Expo Future team has been hard at work continuing to implement our direction and continues to update council and solicit feedback on this project. Today's presentation provides a discussion forum in advance of our joint meeting with Merck in early June. Sorry, I've had 3 hours of sleep. Here with us today, we have Paul Simon and a slate of presenters, including former Metro Councilor Ed Washington. Welcome. Paul.
Good morning. Thank you, President Peterson. Good morning, and good morning, councilors and others. As President Peterson mentioned, my name is Paul Slyman. I'm your General Manager of Major Projects. To my left is former Metro Councilor Ed Washington. He's with PSU right now, and he also co-chairs our Historical Significance and Memorialization Committee. And to my right is James Jesse of Travel Portland. James co-chairs our Sports and Facilities Committee. And coming in right now is Stephanie Redmond, our Expo Future Project Manager. And you'll hear from Stephanie as well later this morning. We have some slides that...
Yep, they are up on Zoom, and there we go.
All right, thanks so much. Let's go ahead and go to slide 2, please. I'm going to briefly share with you how we got here today. Then Councilor Ed will share with you the work of the Historical Significance and Memorialization Committee. James will share the work of his committee. Stephanie will let you know what's ahead in this project. And then Marisa will bring it all together and pose some questions to you. You see a lot of dates in your staff report, and I'm recalling advice that President Peterson gave shortly after taking office. I never said it would be easy. I said it would be worth it. And given the 20 or so years that Metro has been examining Expo and how it serves our community in so many different ways, I'm more convinced than ever that this work is worth it. After you hear from the co-chairs of 2 of our committees, I hope you'll agree. Let's go to the next slide, please. These are the principles that guide our work. The work that you're leading, Expo Future, began in earnest in late 2019 when Council directed a development opportunity study and sought the highest and best use of the property that brings about long-term financial sustainability, notably a capital plan addressing the 3 halls that are 100 years old. That work included substantial stakeholder and tribal input and resulted in the guiding principles. You adopted these by resolution in 2022 and a variety of possible outcomes for Expo. Like every development opportunity study, the work reached a decision point. Sell and invest the proceeds elsewhere, or hold on to the property and renovate it. You directed us to take sell and invest off the table and pursue a request for expressions of interest to gauge external interest in partnering at the site. That request for expressions of interest was completed last year, resulting in 8 submittals that were thoroughly vetted through a series of internal and external processes, including these guiding principles, and interviews that involved representatives from Metro Council and Metropolitan Exposition Recreation Commission. Eventually, you and Merck, in a joint meeting held a year ago, directed us to pursue 6 recommendations. The complete list is included as attachment B in your staff report. Of the 6, 2 are primary and guide our work. Next slide, please. Our goal today is to update you on progress toward accomplishing these 2 objectives, share news and developments, and see what additional information you would like before your joint meeting with Merck, tentatively scheduled for June. Next slide, please. One of the primary recommendations you directed last year was the establishment of a governance structure for our work. You can see it on your screen. You'll see Metro Council and Merck in the dark blue rectangle at the top. Below that, President Peterson serves on the Executive Advisory Committee and co-chairs it with Merck Chair Karis Stoudemire Phillips. That committee meets quarterly, with their next meeting scheduled for March 27th. The Historical Significance and Memorialization Committee, co-chaired by Councilor Ed Washington, meets monthly, and Councilor Simpson serves on that committee. Matter of fact, they're meeting later on this afternoon. And the Sports and Facilities Committee, on the right of the screen, also meets monthly, co-chaired by James. Councilor Lewis serves on that committee, and they'll be meeting next week. A complete list of all committee members is included in your staff report as attachment D. I'd now like to turn it over to our guests so that they can share their experiences and updates with you. Councilor Ed?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Executive Peterson, council members, public. My name is Ed Washington, and I'm here today as a co-chair of the Historical Significance and Memorialization Committee, a mouthful. Our committee is working to develop a vision of how to memorialize the history and culture of the Expo Center site, including the stories of tribes and of the indigenous Japanese, Americans, and Vanport communities who were most impacted by Expo. I'd like to share with you about what we've been working on so far since we convened in September 2023. We've invested time learning about this complex project and the site's history. We've developed strong collaborative relationships with each other and with our community engagement consultant. We met with our sports feasibility consultants on their kickoff visit to Portland to advise them on meaningful and memorializations. And we've advised on development of the community engagement plan and timeline. Additionally, a major theme throughout our conversation has been storytelling as a form of memorialization. There are many communities with their own stories and connections to the site, and we have something to learn from all of them. There are many stories of the hardships, of their hardships, oppression, displacement, and also many of resilience, joy, connection, and play. We see storytelling as an important part of this phase of the project and also a big part of how meaningful memorialization will hopefully take shape one day at the Expo Center site. So as a part of our process, we're planning a storytelling event that informs Expo future committees, future committee members, and Metro leaders such as you all about the site's history and impact. And lastly, we've also spent some time developing preliminary ideas of how to memorialize the historical significance of the Expo Center site. These preliminary ideas include tangible memorializations, so the design of the site itself, such as walking paths and cultural significant plants and food, as well as intangible memorialization thinking about programming, how folks will experience the site, such as educational announcements at events or opportunities for workforce development. Just a little bit personal about this site that makes it so important to me. And one was directly tied here at Metro when I was a member of the council, myself and Councilor John Kavistad at the time, actually led the fight to get the 2 new buildings built at Metro. And I think at that time we felt that, you know, Metro, it's an old site, that building up there is an older site. And, but we felt that there was a real strong future for it. And so here we are. That's a personal story that was through this council. And hopefully those 2 buildings will be a continuous beginning of this project. And also just living in Vanport, which was just right next to Metro, growing up as a young kid there, there were so many things. We used to, all of the school kids from Vanport would go over to Metro in the fall where they used to have the big livestock shows. And a lot of people probably don't realize it, but the University of Portland, back in well, it would have been in the 60s, maybe 70s, when they were building a new gym on the campus, they used the Expo arena site for their basketball team. They played basketball there, and also, that was the first time I ever saw the Harlem Globetrotters play was at the old expo site. So there's a lot more history than that, and then one final little historical story. I ran into a gentleman whose father had worked at Expo when it was the light, when they used to bring the sheep and cows in from Eastern Oregon. And he told me a lot about what it was like and how rough it was in those days, but his father was in charge of that. So there is a great deal of history, not only for the cities and for people like myself, but really it's also for all of you. But what we're asking you to do is start your history there now so that you can be that next connection. And I'm just a little bit wound up this morning because I was rushing like mad. So, thank you so very much. And it is, for me, it is always a pleasure as a former council member to be invited to share thoughts and to work with you all. It means more to me than probably you will ever can imagine. Thank you so very, very much.
I'll just point out that you can see on the slide that we, as part of the committee that Councilor Ed leads, organized 4 tours of the Japanese American Museum of Oregon to help the committee members understand the role of Expo in the Japanese American 1942 incarceration in Oregon. That was very meaningful to the committee members and other people involved in this project. I'd now like to pass it to James Jesse, who's co-chair of our Sports and Facility Committee.
All right, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Mr. Washington. Hello, councilors. My name is James Jesse. Some of you know me as from my day job at Travel Portland. But as Paul mentioned here, it's been my pleasure to serve as one of the co-chairs for the Sports and Facilities Committee, along with Renee King of Providence and Megan Conway, also at Travel Portland. Our committee is focused on helping Metro to develop an overall strategy for pivoting the Expo Center to a sports-focused facility while honoring the historical and cultural value of the site. As a reminder, our 15-member group consists of leadership from regional sports groups, venues and event management, business and tourism, and elected and appointed officials, of which Councilor Lewis is also a member of our committee. I'd like to share with you some of the highlights of our work to date. We have worked to build collaborative relationships with the committee, with community partners, and our sports facility consultants. Hunting Group, I know I have participated in many listening groups with Hunting Group, not only from the facility side, but also community groups and local business leaders here. And we also continue to identify and learn from successes and challenges of comparable facilities across the U.S. that can potentially serve as a model for Expo's redevelopment. I know as a committee, we also took a visit up to Spokane to see their facility up there, the podium. And it was really eye-opening for the group to see kind of what that smaller community was able to do, building that facility there amongst their other tourism assets, and really put together a pretty formidable package there in a small corner of the country where they are. And it was pretty formidable. So some early work that we got to see that gave us some early lessons and some best practices to follow as we go forward. Also, advice on the region's sport and recreation assets and needs, and provides expertise that helps guide the sports facility study. Second. And I'd also like to take a moment to highlight some of the initial findings from our consultant markets assessment phase of the sports facility study. Thank you. Slides up there. Within the Northwest region, Seattle and Spokane have the largest number of tournament-grade sports facilities for aquatics, ice, field sports, and court sports, and the distribution is shown here. And as I mentioned, the Spokane product is up there also. Slide 9, we also look at our local market and where we are undersupplied in. That's indoor track, multi-use indoor facilities for basketball, volleyball, indoor soccer, and football. And we can go ahead and add pickleball to that also. And ice rinks for recreational and competitive hockey and skating. And while professional and amateur sports are strong in Portland, we lack facilities that can serve youth sports and sports tourism that draws visitors from more than 100 miles away. Next slide, please. Expo can serve these needs with a multi-use facility, and the next stage of the feasibility study will begin to identify how we would do that. And Stephanie will talk about that more a little later. We also need a successful sports pivot at Expo that will require flexible facilities that can host a mix of sporting and other events. Nearby support amenities, including quality food and beverage entertainment and lodging, will be crucial. And also, it's very likely that new and continuous partnerships will be essential for development and operations and cash flow for the facility. Next slide, please. Another important piece of our recent work is providing guidance on how to balance sports tourism and generating regional economic impact with opportunities for residents, regular and predictable use at Expo. We're currently working on finalizing a community use statement with the goal of providing clear direction from the SFC to the project team and consultants on expected deliverables around public access. And a brief description of my personal experience to date. One has been echoed with Mr. Washington's statement, and I had probably a surface knowledge of all the issues related to the memorialization of that product, but through a careful tour that they put together for the committee of the Expo site, and went really deep into that history. And then also getting a chance with the group to tour the Japanese American Museum. Just really brought forth a lot of those feelings that I know a lot of the committee brought forth as we started this work. We're having a true concern of not only what we can do from a sports tourism perspective, but also what can we do to impact all those needs of our local youths and our local sports needs. In addition to that, the passion has been carried over this project from a memorialization standpoint behind that, and really opened my eyes, getting a chance to really be more exposed to the history, more exposed to the story. And I know myself and others that attended the museum tour really learned a lot, that we were so focused on what happens out of our community that we really learned a lot what happened within our community and that history that's really important to us on this committee. So I've really enjoyed my time on here, really looking forward to where we head from direction here. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Stephanie.
Thank you, Councilor Washington and Mr. Jesse, for that insight into your committee's work. Council President Peterson, council members, good morning. I'm Stephanie Redmond. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the Expo Future Project Manager. Pleasure to be with you today and to share some key project activities that will be happening with Expo Future from now through the end of the year, including, if we could, next slide, please, including engagement processes, our sports feasibility study, the remaining activities there, and funding and other strategies that we'll be working on. Next slide, please. I'm pleased to announce that community engagement for Expo Future Project will begin in May and span through August of this year. We'll be collecting input on the cultural significance, memorialization, and future uses of the Expo site. We have a robust process planned, and we will be inviting input from the 3 impacted communities that you've heard about, as well as Expo neighbors, longstanding and newer clients of Expo Center, and more to be determined by Mr. Washington's committee, Historical Significance and Memorialization Committee, which is a mouthful. Concurrently, we'll be conducting tribal engagement coordinated by Metro's Tribal Affairs Office, and the Historical Significance Committee will consider this valuable input in developing its vision for memorialization for the site. Let's take a look a little more deeply at the engagement process. Next slide, please. What you have here is a timeline of the engagement milestones. In addition to tribal affairs coordination of the tribe's engagement process, our consultants at Stark Consulting, a co-bid firm that's based in nearby Milwaukee, are working with the Historical Significance Committee to conduct the engagement process. They'll be launching community and tribal engagement process, as I mentioned, in May of this year. As Councilor Washington said, we'll have a storytelling event in June, and you'll be hearing more about that. The purpose of that is really to inform Metro leaders and all of our committee members about the deep and rich and significant history that exists at Expo Center. So look forward to that and more to come. We'll be synthesizing the information that we receive in the engagement process, and the Historical Significance Committee will be using that information to develop recommendations later this fall. And Council and Merck will be seeing those at the conclusion of the committee's work. We'll be presenting their recommendations, their vision for memorialization at Expo Center to Council and to Merck in December. Next slide, please. On the sports feasibility side, as you learned from James in your meeting packet, the sports feasibility study is well underway. In addition to what James shared, the study has also yielded a recap of national trends in sports facilities as well as sports tourism to give us some information about potential there, along with an inventory of features at compatible model facilities and other significant sports complexes in the United States. Next slide, please. The sports feasibility study work will continue with several key findings coming in late spring, and these include completion of the market analysis that's currently underway and completion of stakeholder interviews. I think we've currently done close to 30 interviews with various stakeholders at Expo and in the affected communities, impacted communities. We'll be receiving development of the sports use concepts, and that's probably something we're all very excited to see. That will include identification of 5 recommended sports use scenarios for Expo Center in the future. It will also include identification of any amenities such as lodging, restaurant, retail that might be necessary to support those uses on site and to provide a more positive visitor experience for those who might attend sports activities. And we'll also receive 5 visual representations of those scenarios. We expect to present these to council and to Merck in June for your consideration, and we hope endorsement as well. After those concepts have been developed, Hunden Partners will present that the information that will help you and Merck evaluate the feasibility of those various scenarios. And that will include, importantly, cost estimates for those scenarios, demand and financial projections, employment projections for the scenarios, a 30-year economic impact analysis, and identification and assessment of various funding options, including public options, private options, and public-private partnership options. Incidentally, we'll be retaining a consultant who will separately assess and report on the potential for philanthropic engagement and participation in this venture. We do think there's an opportunity there. Following presentation of the business case, we will also conduct any other due diligence that may be required as we consider the feasibility of a sports pivot. Next slide, please. This slide shows our 2 timelines and milestones together, along with the intersection of the 2 parts of this project, historical significance and memorialization and the sports pivot. In addition to these activities, in 2024, we will also provide continued communication and updates to stakeholders. We'll expand the work of the Expo Future Funding Task Force to strategize about how to best fund the project, always a key consideration. And we'll continue working with the City of Portland Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and Metro's Planning Development and Research Department to make sure that we're prepared to address any changes to zoning or Expo's employment areas designation that might be necessary to realize Expo's future vision. As you can see here in the slide, at the conclusion of Phase 2, you'll be receiving a full package of memorialization and sports pivot and funding strategies that you and Merck will receive in December of this year. Assuming endorsement and approval, we will continue on into the master planning process with additional community engagement, of course, involved to flesh out those planning details and the specifics of Expo Future. So I hope that gives you a sense of what's in store for Expo Future through the rest of the year. And it's my pleasure to hand off to Metro CEO Marissa Madrigal. Marissa?
Thank you.
Next slide, please.
Thank you, former Councilor Washington, Mr. Jesse, and the Expo Futures team. You continue to rock it. Good morning, President Peterson and Council. I just wanted to provide a brief perspective. I continue to, be excited about this project every time I'm out in the community chatting with people about it. There's a buzz, and there's just a broadening recognition, not just about Expo, but about Oregon as this sports powerhouse that continues to grow and strengthen. And I think it's something that is really giving people a lot of hope for the future and sort of a building on our strengths and finding our way out of, the depths of despair that we've been in across the region. So I also am just continue to be in awe of the team and our amazing committees holding both things, both the possibility of economic development in sports and this meaningful memorialization of the history of the site. We had a chance to visit the Japanese American Museum of Oregon, and I was just really struck by some of the historical documents from, 100 years ago, 80 years ago, and some of the language that's being used. That is the same as some of the language being used to denigrate and to alienate Americans today. And I think that there is just a mission here. This is a moment for us to be able to reflect back and teach people about what happened so that it truly never does happen again. Because I fear that we are on the wrong track with a lot of that language and rhetoric. So it's important for us to continue to hold both those things, the excitement for sports and also the opportunity to put our stake in the ground and learn as a community and teach our children and their children how awful things can get, but also how we can heal. The project has allowed Metro to build new relationships and new parts of the region, both in professional and amateur sports, which has been incredibly exciting. We're going to continue to build on that as we go forward. And we look forward to a point when you receive our recommendations or the scenarios, and we can continue to move into the next phases of this project. Let's see, last slide. We've just got some questions for you for discussion. So first, does the Metro Council have any questions, feedback, or guidance for the project at this time based on what you've heard or things that you've heard in the community, questions that have come up for you? And then do you have any specific information or data needs before the joint council and MARC meeting in June? So that we can make that a productive meeting for you. And that's all we have.
Thank you. And thank you to the presenters. That was amazing. It's good to hear the progress. Counselors, any questions, comments? Trying to watch both at the same time. Counselor Nolan?
Thanks, Madam President. Welcome to my constituent, former counselor, Mr. Washington. It's good to see you. Thanks for the presentation. I understand that the timeline needs to develop deliberately. I can't help but think about how we will fund this and what you can tell us now about your confidence level of the revenue streams that this economic analysis will rely on. Are we potentially looking at a bond referral, or do we think there are internal or philanthropic resources that will support this? I want to make sure we've got good foundation under it, because all these wonderful concepts and commitments need to advance in a way that is fiscally responsible. So tell me some good news about that.
I'll take that. So, and I'm looking at Andrew too, right over your left shoulder. So thank you for the question, Councilor Nolan.
All of this in your pocket? Okay.
So Councilor Nolan, that is a very important question. As you know from your information packet, Expo has been studied quite a few times in the past. And we are serious about not only the two objectives that these gentlemen have shared with you, but how you pay for all this, and that's why it's on there. Part of Hunden's work for us is to identify various ways that an Expo Future could be funded. But we're not waiting for that recommendation to come in. And we've already started having internal conversations that start to socialize various concepts that include sponsorships, naming rights, revenue sharing, public-private partnerships. So we're learning from across the country how these things work. We're not using the term bond referral in our conversations because we want to be very open to the different ways that the future of Expo could be funded. And so toward that end, later today, Andrew's leading a conversation. We're starting small internally before we get the Hunden report that involves some MERC commissioners and a Metro counselor to just talk a little bit more about those things I already mentioned. What about naming rights? What about philanthropy? We've also already engaged our federal affairs advisor to see what about the opportunity for the federal government to be invited to help sort of share in funding some of the memorialization needs that need to happen there, since it was a federal action that incarcerated Japanese Americans in 1942. All these things are in play right now, and your question is very timely because later on today, we're starting those initial conversations with the MERC commissioners and Metro counselor.
Great. That is good news, thanks.
I'm not saying it will be easy, okay?
No, but it will be worth it.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Counselor Rosenthal and then Huang.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for our honored guests to be here and give us an explanation. I'm continually impressed by the thoughtfulness and thoroughness of the process that we're using to make sure we're trying to cover all bases, particularly regarding the historical and cultural significance. I have a particular question, though, that I wouldn't say it troubles me, but I just wonder, sports, we use the term sports in a very general sense, but there's track sports, there's court sports, there's water sports, there's field sports, there's winter sports. So obviously, court sports are easily adapted to the current site. What are we thinking in terms of expanding that concept to include some of these other kinds of sports? You know, so we have maybe a multi-seasonal use or something like that. Are there options that we are exploring?
Could we maybe do James and then Stephanie?
Sure. You know, there's lots of things that we're taking a look at right now in this initial process. And as you're correct, you know, the flat surface sports there that we can do currently in that building kind of allowed us to get to this point now here also, and probably will have some use in the future. When we took a look at the podium site, you know, they made the specific pivot there to go with track. With a hydraulic track system too. And again, your seasonality that you're looking at for track is those winter months and things like that. And so that's one of the options that we're taking a look at here. We're also taking a look at what options come with water, what options come with ice. You know, really trying to form what is going to be the right mix for Portland. There's a lot of seasonality that plays into there about which sports that you actually go for. So, but I think as we mentioned here throughout the presentation, it's going to be kind of a flexible use space is what we're going to be looking for. And I think as we go through this process, we'll determine what the best business case is for the proper sports here. But we do know in terms of popularity, volleyball, basketball, where pickleball is going to, you know, and what we're also taking a look at is the yield you get from each sport. And that yield, in my case, talking about what hotel room night usage is driven in from those particular sports. So I think there's a big spectrum of what we're taking a look at now, but ultimately at the end of the day, we're trying to work to that point to where we know what works well for Portland, what kind of is the specific needs are in the current community overall, and then make the best case usage for what we need here seasonably and what fits the needs assessment that we're getting from the Hunden Group.
Thank you.
Anything to add?
I would just add, in addition to what James said, Hunden Partners, our consultant, is taking a deep dive into the sports mix that we propose for the future. And they're factoring what James said. They're also doing a deep market analysis. And I really appreciate about that market analysis that it's also grounded in conversations and reality, conversations with our local sports experts, team operators, event organizers. And as James said, you know, part of the success of a lot of these facilities nationwide is that they may have a sports emphasis, but they are flexible and adaptable to other uses. For example, in Spokane, the Podium, which is primarily a sports facility for tournaments and competitive events, also hosts things like local graduations. It hosts activities like concerts. And so having that flat, flexible floor space, like James talked about, is a real asset that we have at Expo. And we're looking forward to Hunden to help us pinpoint what the right mix is for our market and the opportunities that we have here in the region.
Great. Counselor Huang, and then Gonzalez, and then Simpson.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you all for work and presentation. I was really heartened to hear that you all were able to visit the Japanese American Museum, and thank you for your comments, Marisa. Just that rhetoric is increasing, and we're seeing it, out in the community every day. So thank you for taking that segment of the work super seriously. My question, so last night I had the great privilege of going to the Portland Trail Blazers game, and I actually sat behind the Blazers esports team, and this was kind of continuing on the line of questioning from Councilor Rosenthal. But maybe it's in the flexible flooring kind of strategy. But yeah, I was just reading on Business Insider that esports had 646 million viewers last year, and 837% year-on-year investment growth into the sector. And nowadays, blockbuster video games are outgrossing blockbuster movies. So I'm wondering, in that definition of sports, is that something that you're looking into, just because it's a increasing draw, especially for younger generations?
I'll take that. Thank you for that question, Counselor. And you've raised this to us in the past, and we hear you, and that's included in the types of things that Hunden is looking at. We're endeavoring to not define sports because it doesn't lead us down a productive path. We're really focusing on what could we do that draws people here for tourism. This is really what James does every day. And so esports, if there's a competition here, a regional competition, nationwide competition, and it draws people here for tourism, that raises our entire region, showcases our region to the rest of the country. That's what we're looking for. What we've found is some of the first calls I've received as the project sponsor in this is, what's a sport and what's not a sport? Is a dog show a sport? Is a dog show not a sport? You might not know this, but dogs have been on the cover of Sports Illustrated many times. And so what we're trying to do is not be in that box where we're arguing, is this a sport or not a sport? We think really the right frame of mind is to be open to competitions that the Expo Future, Matthew and his team, can calendar in that bring people here and achieve the kinds of objectives that Travel Portland and people like James are seeking. So Hunden is including those kinds of things, along with the traditional sports that James mentioned, volleyball, basketball teams, but we're not excluding any at this point.
Okay, great, thank you.
If I may add as well, Expo currently offers hosting opportunities for those tournaments. And I think they've held one or two in the past and are considering or have recently upgraded their internet capacity to be able to do that. I think that's a pet project of the sales manager at Expo Center.
Yeah, I saw some of those events at the convention center as well. But I was just looking at, there's dedicated esports facilities around the country. And I'm not saying that that's a pathway we need to go, but I just wanted to make sure that we're exploring opportunities like that as well.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Great, thanks, President Peterson. Hi, everyone from the Zoom screen here. Appreciate our presenters, Councilor Washington, always wonderful to have you here, and to our staff and to all the committee members, that thank you so much for the hard work and getting us to this point, and to Councilor Simpson, Councilor Lewis also for the different levels of engagement on the different project committees. I think there's no question that that sports for our region just has such a significant influence and potential. And one of the items that I appreciated of the many attachments that we were able to review today was highlighting the fact that sports can be a catalytic force to help our region rise and grow through the tourism that hopefully we'll get to see again very soon from the pre-pandemic era, and that will definitely help rise our reputation, but also the many industry and sectors that rely on that. I did have a question. There was on the final attachment was the kind of the top lines and excerpts we're looking at the Pacific Northwest as a region and the map with the facilities and whatnot. One of the items that kind of popped up to me was one, the public-private partnership, which I think is excellent and I want us to lean into. But two, there was a conversation around potential commercial redevelopment on the site, and I'm curious to hear how those kind of if there's been any ideas or how that would come about in terms of the kind of committee structure that we have going and the goal setting in that area, the kind of the developments that we'd want to encourage or not encourage. So that's one thing that feels top of mind. And obviously there's a mega project happening with the I-5 bridge as well nearby, and so I'm thinking through just the timeline of major constructions and things like that. And second of all, I just want to also echo the first comment made by Councilor Nolan on funding and how we really get to bring the resources to the table to bring this vision into fruition, and to just appreciate the level of focus and energy that we're going to be dedicating on that over the next year, and really appreciate the timeline that we've laid out to get some scenarios on the table. So questions and comment, thanks.
Would you like to take the first half or both?
Sure. Thank you, Councilor Gonzalez. In terms of public-private partnerships, we're definitely looking forward to case studies and highlights and recommendation from our sports feasibility study partners, Hunden Consultants. And again, that will be coming later spring, early summer. In terms of the potential commercial redevelopment at the site, great question, and I would say to be determined. That's part of the mix of what our consultants are looking at, is in addition to the mix of activities, be it sports, other entertainment events, community use, those kinds of things, Hunden Partners will be recommending support amenities at the site that will help enhance the experience for visitors to Expo Center. And that could include a variety of things. Commonly what happens in concurrent with sports facilities, lodging, restaurant, retail, to support the visitors that are coming. Think of a family who might have one kid who has a tournament or a game at 9 in the morning and another kid at 12:30. What do you do in that gap time? And also, as James said, how do we draw those visitors to share some lodging revenue with us? So Hunden Partners will be looking at those support amenities. We don't know what to expect, but those are pretty typical in the mix for facilities such as these, and some of the recent trends that we've learned about, particularly in sports tourism. Spokane is a great example of this. Having the mass of almost an entertainment district where we can capture visitors' attention, make the experience easy with them so they don't have to get in the car and drive half an hour to get to a hotel or to get a healthy meal or that kind of thing. Having that concentrated amenities close to the facility, sometimes even at the facility, if not neighboring small businesses around, is really a key to success. Paul, anything to add?
Thank you for that, Stephanie. The only thing I'd add to be responsive to your question, Councilor Gonzalez, is improvements to the existing expo halls might be funded a certain way, but to create a pad for lodging, restaurant, or retail might be funded a very different way, through a partnership, through some sort of agreement. And so we're being very flexible and open to how we look at how you might fund different things. I will say that our partners at Prosper Portland, Port of Portland, have been very generous with their experience in how you do these things on a campus setting, and we're learning from them. And months ago, we started early conversations with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability just to start talking through sort of this campus idea and what it might mean for a future Expo master plan. So not easy topics at all, but there won't be a single solution to how this is funded, because there will probably be different ways you fund different portions of the 53 acres.
One addition I can
Yeah, makes
offer
sense.
to the early part of the councilman's question there in regards to resiliency of sports. And that's the one thing that we found out through the pandemic about how resilient the sports is as a market. When we saw failures in the business market, in the corporate market, in the National Association market, the one market that was bulletproof during the pandemic was sports. And the communities that pivoted towards sports were those ones that kind of made it through best and kind of had a best, coming out of the pandemic. So the one thing that we learned here was to really adjust our market to be more market favorable to sports in terms of rates and things like that. And when we see things like our summer tourist season, hasn't come back yet, our business travel hasn't come back yet. This is a natural market, I think, for Portland to play in, to kind of take the place in some of those. So sports has really proven throughout 9/11 and my 30 years of doing this, every 5 years we seem to go through some kind of cycle that takes us down, up and down. The one market that just stays there and actually gets stronger is that sports market. So I think it's a perfect mix to go into our current meeting mix here in Portland. But it due to your earlier questions there, Councilman, when we just came out of the pandemic and we saw the devastation that occurred, we all knew that the sports pivot was smart for us and is drought resistant, and it's just a natural piece of the pie in Portland that we feel we should go toward.
Thanks, Mr. James. Can I ask a quick follow-up question, Council President?
Sure.
All right, great. One of the items that I had forgotten to ask about as I was talking about commercial development was around tenants, and I'm curious with the study that we've looked at for the ecosystem of facilities throughout the Pacific Northwest all the way up to Seattle. One of the possibilities that we've discussed here locally is, the possibility of a WNBA team or some kind of team needing a long-term tenant for a training facility. My question is, for sites that we've studied in our kind of larger geographical region, what frequency do these other venues have that kind of long-term tenant partnership in mind? I did see that pop up regularly also in the additional comments and feedback that we received, whether it's the Winterhawks or whether it's other teams and things like that. But kind of curious if there's anything that has stood out so far from our learning. Thanks.
Thanks for that question, Councilor Gonzalez. We would certainly appreciate having an anchor tenant that activates the Expo site Monday through Friday. And that's something the Sports and Facility Committee has discussed. Councilor Lewis brought this to us a while ago. Those are very difficult things to secure. It doesn't mean that we have in any way given up on it. It's part of our conversation on the Sports and Facility Committee to really make the site attractive week-long. Put differently, if we're going to have conversations with lodging, restaurant, or retail providers, they would certainly want to know that we don't just have episodic events at Expo. We have a base of action that's going on there Monday through Friday. So it's on our minds. We're not in a position to say if anyone is ready to be our anchor tenant, but it's certainly part of our work.
All right, thank you so much, Paul.
All right, Councilor Lewis Simpson, and then I will weigh in, and then there's some other councilors who want another turn.
Sure, to follow up on Councilor Gonzalez, in terms of an anchor tenant, obviously with great ease would come a sports team, but something that's been kicking around in my head is the idea of an athlete in residence program. We have several athletes based in the Portland metro area who play on USA teams. They're by definition some of the best in the world, but they have to fly oftentimes at least 2 hours to find their closest teammate. And I wonder if there'd be some partnership opportunity there to give them a sense of community even in different sports. But what comes to mind for me today is a question around when and where in this process we're going to be able to make our mark in terms of inclusivity and language guiding that as a decision-making tool. There's obviously the need for us on the cultural side to look at our history and how we're repeating it through lack of knowledge in our present. But then there's also multiple different ways inclusivity shows up in sports. And sometimes it's the best of humanity and sometimes it's the absolute worst. And I would like for us to be able, as a venue manager, to strive for it to be a place where you only find teams that are inclusive and to make preferences and choices based off of that. So I would bring it to us to decide if that's something we decide with Merck or if that's an executive steering committee question. But what point in the process can we make that statement and make that mark?
What we could do, Counselor Washington, is add this notion that Counselor Lewis is referring to the things that your committee discusses.
Okay.
And certainly it could be part of, not necessarily meaningful memorialization, but how do you make the most inclusive facility possible that really represents our regional values? Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes, please.
And certainly, Counselor, there's, it would be strengthened if we brought this concept to the Executive Advisory Committee that President Peterson co-chairs as well, just to really reinforce that. Okay. And we,
Make sure that happens.
thank you.
Okay, Counselor Simpson.
Thank you, President Peterson, and thank you, Paul, James, Stephanie. And I want to give you a special thank you to you, Counselor Washington, and Lynn Fukuyama for the work that y'all are leading on the Historical Significance and Memorialization Committee. I got it. I nailed it. I nailed it. You know, those are some hard conversations to have, but also some really good experiences to listen to. And I want to uplift and really talk a bit about you forgot a story, Mr. Washington, that Expo Center was also the place for the Marbles Championship.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I want to make sure, you know, as we're working with Hunden and we're thinking about concept, again, I'm a construction guy, I would love to make sure that part of the stories that we are hearing are also a part of the design. Like, we should be able to look at architectural features and be able to clearly point out what we're looking at and how to explain it, or have some type of plaque or something to give that story. And I also want to uplift a little bit of what Councilor Wong said about like this new wave of esports, but it's also tied into sports in itself. So if you had a chance to check out the All-Star game, NBA All-Star game, not the game itself, but the like skills challenge and the celebrity games, that court was interactive. That court was like, it was digitized. And so in thinking about that, and I've seen esports myself, like that whole complex is interactive. I would like for us to think about that, because that's how we're gonna attract some of those big events. Because if an all-star game, for example, comes to Portland, they're not gonna run everything through the MODA. They're gonna look at other sites like that and say, well, we can run celebrity games, skills challenge, things like that through that venue, while also running the all-star game through the MODA. And so really thinking forward thinking around our design, some technological advancements that could be put into that building that would make us attractive to bringing more events to this space.
Thanks. Before we go around the horn again, I would just like to say thank you to all of our folks that have weighed in. James, thanks for all of your expertise, having seen other places around the country as well. It helps to have outside experience on being able to see how to use these to the best of our advantage, our assets that we have in Portland. So thank you for being part of this endeavor. I guess I have two things that I just want to refine the question on. The end of the year, you had designated December as a moment to talk about financials, but will we be making a decision by the end of the year on moving forward with a choice, or is that just the first time we will be having the conversation?
President Peterson, you will have conversations as early as June. What we're bringing to you at the end of this calendar year is what we term a vision plan, based on conversations with Urban Land Institute and others, like make sure we have the right terminology. The vision plan will have some high-level concepts for you. What portions of the facility will be sort of sports primarily or competition primarily, and where on the facility might you include other support features like lodging, restaurant, retail, and how those various portions of the campus might be funded. So you won't be deciding definitely pursue this or definitely pursue that. What you'll say is take this vision plan and move forward into a master planning effort and get smart about a pad and how large that pad is for different site amenities and how you might have a say, a public-private partnership or a ground lease, or you might develop it yourself. But the details and exact costs of that won't happen this year.
Okay, so we'll be getting a recommendation from the committee? I mean, where's
You-
that
You'll
recommend?
you'll be
or is
getting a
that from-
COO's recommendation.
That's-
Yes, so we'll assemble all that for our boss, and it will be a COO's recommendation, much like last year.
Okay, I think you guys have done a great job sticking to the timeline, and I just want to reiterate, sticking to the timeline, I think, is important on any of these big projects, while still taking into account any unforeseen conversations that need to happen, which are really always important. The whole point of going through all of this is to minimize risk, right? So as you find things that might increase risk that we need to delve into, definitely want to do that. But I think it's important to keep that timeline in mind so that we can get to a final decision as soon as possible. I think the second part of it is, and we've talked about this, is as soon as we can, after budget is passed, starting a conversation with the Metro Council on exactly what is the range, just the education of public-private partnerships in general in Metro. How have we used them? Because we have used them, how can we continue to use them? And then what principles and values do we want to make sure that we are infusing into those conversations around public-private partnerships to make it very clear about where we will and will not go from the beginning, and if there needs to be conversation up front with anybody that we're going to be in a partnership with, that they are recognition that there's no surprises, again, minimizing risk. So I appreciate that as well. I think that morphs very well with morphs. I think that sets, that will lay into this timeline really well, but obviously bringing along Merck at the same time will be important, because this is not the only conversation where we have a potential for public-private partnerships in Metro. So I think it's just it's a general one that can then need to be refined to each and every different project. But I think it would be helpful to have a better understanding of how public-private partnerships have morphed over the last 20, 25 years, what we've learned in contracting, how to protect the public good specifically so that there is good coming out of this. And I think to Councilor Simpson's constant reminders to me, it's a 4P, not a 3P, including the philanthropy. So just want to be completely aware of all those options moving forward. Because I think the most important decision after we get the elements of what we want to see is how do we enter into that? Because I don't see us being able to do this ourselves without some sort of partnership. I want to be very clear about that. This is not going to happen unless we find partners to work with. So, and it'll be more than one. So that was a comment at that point. You don't need to respond, but I appreciate it. Councilor Rosenthal and then Councilor Wong.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I want to concur with Councilor Lewis. I mean, I consider diversity and inclusion to be a core principle of Metro. And so it should be a core principle of how we move forward on this. I mean, we have a lot of good people working on this, so I'm assuming that it's going to be successful in some sense, exactly what it's going to look like. But the sooner that we enshrine the core principles that we're going to deal with sports on this basis, the sooner the better. So if that takes a resolution coming to council or to Merck, I would welcome that, just to make sure that this becomes a top priority, that we make sure that everybody knows that this is going to be part of the process. But then I have one very specific question. Assuming we're going to be successful at some point in the near future, well, maybe not middle future, let's say middle future, it might not be, it's not the next 2 years. How are we going to enhance transportation between PDX and the Expo Center to facilitate, for example, teams flying in and getting there? MAX is not useful unless we extend MAX from the airport to the Expo Center, for example. But the current roundabout is, so how do we enhance transportation from one of our core hubs to this center if that's what we're going to do?
I'll try and tackle this one. So just to clarify, the MAX currently does run from the airport to Expo. You have to take a transfer, but the MAX line ends at Expo, and we are in close communication with TriMet as well as the Bridge Project to figure out how can we view that terminus as an asset to the site, and we want to continue to enhance and work with our partners as they build a new bridge, as they, look at what their needs are there. But we've also been very clear that whatever changes are made need to be compatible and enhance the activities, not just of Expo, but PIR, Delta Park, like those areas. So I think that there's a lot more conversation to be had there about the particulars, but just at a high level, I think the Max line going to Expo is a huge asset for us. It connects Expo to this region. It connects us to the rest of the city, and I think is just an absolute benefit. As far as other modes of transportation, I'm not a transportation expert. I would leave that to some of our other folks. I don't know, President Peterson, if there's anything that you want to add, but we're definitely thinking about how we get people to and from Expo.
I think you've named the big ones, but I do want to say that I had a really good conversation with General Manager Sam Dessou, with the understanding that, over the last year and a half that we've been talking about what the programming of the site would be after a decision was made to move to a sports-centered facility. I think he has a better understanding now that we need the utmost flexibility in our footprint of what will happen, and that having a maintenance facility at that location is probably no longer a compatible use if we're going to have a hotel and restaurant and other things out, other pads out there. That's not exactly going to work. With that knowledge, I think he's working with staff to come up with what their minimum may be in needs that we can help facilitate. So, because it is an asset to have a light rail station. All right, Councilor Wong.
Oh, great. Thank you, Madam President. We're talking about some big concepts here today. So, we're talking about public-private partnerships, but another kind of big concept that we're all working on is community resilience or disaster resilience. And, I know the planning department is about planning. The planning department is going to submit, hopefully, a major grant to the feds to support community resilience hubs around the region. And, I'm wondering, in the planning, have you all been giving thought to the role that the Expo Center could play in the future in, supporting the community in times of crisis around, potentially, the earthquake, or, in times of major heat or weather events, just because we have a great public facility, like what kind of planning could we do to, ensure broader community resilience, along with our other stated goals?
Thank you for that question. Matthew Rochford and his team do a good bit of that already, as you know. They have a high level of community support. Also, Johannes Wolde has shared with me the community resilience concept that he's been developed, and said as that matures, we could talk about Expo as perhaps also serving in that function. I think it would probably be on an episodic basis. So what I have learned about community resilience centers is you need to have a base level of activity there so they stay current. Otherwise, foods are perishable, knowledge is perishable. But there's nothing that would keep the kinds of service that Matthew and the other venues provide to the community now from occurring in the future. What I'm hearing from you is as you get to design, which is still over a year out, think about how Expo could be used in a surge capacity to meet community needs in the event of weather events, climate events, episodic events, and so on. Is that?
That's right. I think it's just having that as, part of the potential function in the future, and, having it be an asset, ongoing, but also in times of
Certainly,
crisis,
and as an aside, the two modern halls have full functioning air handling equipment, HVAC, et cetera, and the three older halls do not have modern air handling equipment. So in the event of extreme heat during portions of the summer, they would not be assets that could be used for the
And
community.
RV older halls, would they withstand a major earthquake?
I think they probably do not meet modern seismic requirements because of their age. So it would depend on the magnitude of the earthquake and the epicenter and how it affects our region.
Yeah, and that would be part of the planning process is, if there were a major seismic event in the next 50 years, what would we do then to?
For Expo to remain standing or for Expo to be used as an asset to the
Both,
community?
both how it can be useful during that, episode, but also if it's no longer usable, like what happens then if it's like no longer architecturally sound. So being able to plan for those kind of contingencies.
Well, certainly I would look to Marisa, what we will plan for when we get to conceptual design and then eventually construction drawings is to make sure that any changes to Expo meet all the modern seismic and other requirements. But then, Marisa would guide us on what role Expo plays in the region as an asset in the response to any kinds of events.
Absolutely, yeah, we've Expo's been around for 100 years, and we're planning for the next 100 years, right? In that 100 years, there's a great chance that seismic event occurs. So you want us to be planning for that too. Thank you.
Councilor Nolan, Lewis, Simpson, and then we'll wrap up.
Thanks, Madam President. I want to make sure in your planning around inclusion that differently abled athletes as well as participants are considered in that. And that goes beyond Special Olympics. Lots of sports have particular competitions for a variety of disabilities. And I would like to see us shout inclusive to that part of our community as well.
Thank you, Councilor Nolan. I take that with, similar to what Councilor Lewis shared with us. I should have mentioned earlier our guiding principles, and Stephanie reminded me. They speak to this,
Okay.
That you adopted by resolution, and we will make sure, I think we'll start with the Historical Significance and Memorialization Committee to start there. But if that's not the right place to reinforce inclusion, we'll reinforce it elsewhere within the process, and it might be at the Executive Advisory Committee level. But we do mention that very prominently in our guiding principles, so we'll just reinforce it.
Thanks.
If I may also add, our consultants, Hunden Partners, are moving into the next wave of interviews, which includes representatives of the differently abled sports communities. We're connecting, thanks to a member of our own staff who is an active wheelchair rugby participant. We're connected with a couple of adaptive sports groups that will be representing their information to Hunden Partners to look at opportunities.
That's
I'm
fabulous.
excited about that.
Good.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. The conversation around the TriMet stop brought to mind the fact that we are managing currently a very large park and ride flat surface parking lot. And there have been question marks about if we want to continue to be in a flat surface parking lot business. Obviously, it affords us the ability to host Cirque du Soleil, which needs an incredible amount of space for their tent. But would love to think about prospects for a garage. And with that, starting to think about what it means to come over the Max, over the Columbia River, and be welcomed to Oregon. And I think Metro's the perfect agency to greet folks coming over on the Max, but we're gonna need the city of Portland's help. I've appreciated that the city of Portland has been there wearing their Delta Park hats, but we need them to be there in other capacities as well. So, appreciate their partnership, particularly managing a adjacent sports facility. But we're gonna need their help welcoming folks from Washington State.
I believe we have folks from planning, and I'm not sure if you guys are engaged, but on the station design committee, correct?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
So, but I think with that, It would be, I've always wondered why we don't have like Amtrak does on planes coming into Portland as you're landing. Here are your options. Here's where the light rail is situated here, right? Why we couldn't have that same kind of information when you come across into Oregon? Welcome to Oregon on the speakers. So, yeah, things like that would be really great.
President Peterson and Councilor Lewis, a visitor center as a concept has been mentioned.
Yeah.
And I do think that we would provide an ideal location for that. So at any opportunity that we have, rest assured that we will be bringing that up.
Yeah. Right. Question. Because somebody asked me this the other day, and unfortunately I knew the answer. Electric vehicle charging stations are not allowed at rest areas. I don't know about, only because the association that gets preference treatment for rest areas, and I don't know about welcoming state welcome centers, because this would be a federally funded process. Could we just look into it, whether it's the deaf, I believe it's Deaf and Blind Association gets preference for contracting at all rest areas? I don't know about welcome centers. And therefore, if they don't want to do it, it doesn't happen at a rest area. So that's why there's only soda pop and whatever at rest areas. Kind of tried to work with Congressman DeFazio on that, but that didn't happen. A change in that. So I don't know if you were thinking about also charging stations.
We will, now.
Well, what other restrictions are there with the federal money coming in for a welcome center? That's really my question at the higher level. Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam President. I won't take too much time so you can wrap up. I just want to remind us, the sports talk is great, and I just want to bring up a comment that was shared to me with one of the committee members, was that, we don't want our experiences as stories to end up over there in the corner while we have all this sports in front of us. When we walk through that space, we want to see our experiences and stories throughout. So I don't want us to forget that part of this whole sports complex is making sure that we tell the stories of the land that was stolen from people, where people were internment, and where people were forcibly relocated. I think that's important for us to really sit on, and I think we will sit on the right side of history if we do this thing the right way.
Yep.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
I've already got a piece of artwork commissioned in my head that's from the angle of the marble looking up at a young Ed Washington. An entire mural.
I love that. Imagine all the pictures and hashtags.
I'm
we
pretty
get.
sure that one doesn't exist, but it's in my mind now.
That, Paul, make sure there's a hashtag area somewhere in the space.
Anyway, all right, well, thank you all. We'll wrap up, and thanks for the update. Do you have anything else to add?
Councilor Ed Washington asked if he could have.
I just want to say to Jesse, with your group, you might have them have some discussion when you're talking about activities. One of the things that we've never offered for high school students is winter track, indoor track in the winter. And it's done in college, and they do the rally, pep squad and all that, but indoor track.
That's what we saw at the podium.
Yeah.
Was the potential for that.
Yeah.
So thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so very much.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. We can't wait to have you back, and this is very exciting. As per norm, we are all 100% engaged and excited, and however we can help, make sure that we find the financing to bring it home. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, we'll move on to CLO Communications.
I don't have any updates for you today.
You.
You're welcome.
Not that I don't want it. Counselor Communications.
Thanks.
Counselor Wong.
Thank you, Madam President. I had the great honor of representing Metro at the grand opening of the OHSU and Adventist new federally qualified health center that just opened up by Mall 205. It's at the border between District 6 and District 1. And they say they're going to serve 50,000 patient visits starting next year. And it's a great location because it's also located on transit and within a 10-minute drive of over 500 units of affordable housing that Metro helped fund through the Metro Housing Bond, and just a sorely needed and great addition to the community. Thanks.
Councilor Lewis, Rosenthal, and Nolan.
Sure, thank you, colleagues. I was able to hoist a shovel of dirt at the groundbreaking in Milwaukee that took place this weekend at Balfour Park. But it was kind of metaphorical groundbreaking, not only of Balfour, but also of Bowman, Bray, and Scott Park. So 3 groundbreakings at once. And this is exciting because 2 of the 3 properties were purchased with local share from the 06 bond. And we also have a nature and neighborhood grant that went into the inclusive planning process for the natural area playscapes. This is additionally funded through the state legislative directed ARPA funds. So a lot of layers coming together, but Metro was definitely a key funder of these 3 really exciting park developments in Milwaukee. So thanks to Parks and Nature for supporting me getting ready to help with that groundbreaking. Additionally, I wanted to report back that I was at the Housing Land Advocates Conference on Friday. It was their largest ever conference. They had to shift venues at PSU. And we had a really good set of conversations around how this entire state can work together to meet the housing needs that are obviously coming out of state level rulemaking and policy, but ideas for innovation as well.
Thank you. Rosenthal and Nolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just a brief one. I attended the Housing Forum in Tigard yesterday evening, and it was well attended. It was the panel was quite knowledgeable. 2 things that struck out. One said that we were the only region other than the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, that is trying to deal with this on a regional basis, which was good. And then one of the panels, Steve, I believe, said that if we can't get it right, then hardly anybody else is going to get it right, because we have, and they mentioned Metro specifically and the support of housing services and the tie-in between those 2 and the need to keep that running. So it was a positive. There was a lot of positive comments.
Great. Councilor Nolan.
Madam President and colleagues, I was at the grand opening of Emmons Place, new affordable housing development in Northwest Portland. It's wonderful to celebrate any of the projects arriving at completion that we have participated in, but this one was of particular note that I wanted to share. The project was opposed by neighbors to the extent of appealing the location and project to the city council and then to LUBA. It's hard to describe it as anything other than a NIMBY attitude, which is almost exactly why Metro put part of its contribution into this project in the first place, because the location has a 99 walk score. We put transit-oriented development dollars in there to provide housing, particularly for seniors who don't drive, maybe never did. The person that the place is named after has never had a driver's license. But I wanted to share how wonderful it felt to be providing that kind of leadership. And the other unique thing about this is that the project has about 144 units, about 3/4 of which are in a brand new building, and the other quarter are in an historic building on the National Registry. So the complexity of preserving historic building and providing modern convenience, safety, and accommodations was really beautifully designed into the system. It's something I was proud to represent us all for, and it is heartwarming to see that it really does put an emphasis on our transit-oriented development investments up front. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor.
Awesome, thank you. I'll just round it out. I'm sure you all saw the news last Friday that we, as a region and a state, received $450 million for the Rose Quarter lid, very specifically for the lid out of the Connecting Communities money from the IJA infrastructure, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember the full acronym at the federal level. And $38 million for the Broadway improvements. So the city of Portland and ODOT and I think us should be very happy that all of the work that went into getting that to this point is paying off, and that we are being looked at as a good place to invest nationwide. So I think that's great. And then also the governor came out yesterday and said that she will be indefinitely delaying tolling in the region. And of course, that brings up a conversation for us for 2025 transportation package at the state level of how to finish what projects we have in the pipeline, as well as how do we pay for our transportation system in the future, because we had really relied on that in the RTP, and that's that we just passed. And I think we're going to need to really think about what does that mean. And obviously, vehicle miles traveled is a strong conversation that the legislature and the governor, I know, would like to have as part of this package to replace the fuel tax, which is obviously not supporting our infrastructure needs. So one conversation opens another door, or the end of one conversation opens another door. So I think we'll have to start thinking about what our principles and values are going into the 2025 session. And I know Councilor Gonzalez and I are looking and talking to staff about how to start that conversation region-wide. And we'll be working with all of you on how to have those conversations in the districts to see how we come with a united front of what we need. So, anything else? Are we good at the order? All right, we are adjourned, and our next regular scheduled meeting is Tuesday, March 19th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. Thanks.